All right, we're 3 for 3 here on Panthers on the Plus since I've been in this seat. 3-game win streak. Panthers now moved to 4-3 on the season, above 500 for the first time in nearly 4 years. So vibes are good, but as we were just saying, at what cost? And with that, I'm bringing in my good friend Willie P from WFNZ, who is, as we know, utility man of all things Charlotte sports. We got the post-game coverage for the Panthers. We've got, of course, the voice of Charlotte FC. We're going to do all of this today, but we have to start Panthers, right?
I think you have to. It's not every day you see a team win 3 in a row the way that they have. And I think also just kind of capturing a lot of people's imaginations and hosting the post-game call-in show yesterday, I found it interesting that we've now gotten to a point where we can start picking nits at victories, which I thought that, these were the days that I dreamed of, Danielle, based on the fact that, so much unfortunate results have kind of been the identifier of this team for the past couple of years. I got here basically in 19 and then was here on and off through 19 and 20 and then full-time in 21. So I've obviously been around a lot of the unfortunate moments when it comes to this franchise's recency. Obviously, the last half of 2022, very, very impressive, and obviously the early part of 21 was also very impressive. But at the same point in time, we haven't had a lot of those type of moments around here. And so from this perspective that we look at it now, it's like, okay, you win 13-6, people have complaints. Maybe that means they've turned the corner, which is a positive thing.
No, it's so funny. I saw a reaction on social media because the Panthers posted just final : Panthers 13, Jets 6. And people are like, you're tweeting this as if it's a loss, like just with no expression. But it's like, we're really going to be downplaying because it's that kind of a scoreline. But that's a defensive scoreline.
It is.
And we heard from Nick Scott just now, and we're like, do you love a game like that where you're holding them just to 2 field goals? And again, it's the Jets. We take that with a grain of salt. But like, that's got to feel really good for that defense.
I think of Dean Smith when he says, I love a 1-0. That's kind of the way it felt with this game. And, I think you're lucky, too, that there's no college football playoff committee you have to answer to, or game control, or BCS, or anything like that, because style points in the National Football League are not necessary. Wins are wins, and losses are losses, and they're all treated equally. And even Dave Canales said in his post-game locker room speech to the team, hey, look, we love an ugly win. And I think the thing that is personified about this victory is that you saw 3 players who I think were very, very key in stepping things up. Obviously, Xavier Leggett, 9 catches, 92 yards, touchdown catch from Bryce Young is incredibly impressive to see. A great comeback for him after what had been a very, very tough start to the season. I think something also they very much needed, because it did seem like the Jets put a concerted effort on Teteroa McMillan because of Sauce Gardner's involvement in the contest, and that's really the first guy who traveled with Teteroa in his time in the National Football League. So you needed to find some other way to figure out how to exploit that Jet defense. And then obviously on the other side of the football, the 2 money men, Derek Brown, J.C. Horn, doing their thing. Brown with 7 tackles, 2 sacks, and obviously a lot of run stuffs, and then the 2 J.C. Horn picks. And you can pick which one's your favorite, because when you think about the way that his game is played, he doesn't get a lot of action at times. He's almost like a goalkeeper who doesn't see shots because people throw the other way. I think I saw the PFF numbers said something to the effect of he had 1 completion against, a 6.9 quarterback rating, and obviously the 2 interceptions, one-handed interception in the end zone, and then the one that would have been an explosive gain down the other way. So I think it's something that proves that these 2 guys who got their money are big impact players, particularly so with Brown, because I think it's so very hard to quantify their worth. I think the knock on JC has always been, he doesn't get enough interceptions. And I think the knock on Brown was, he's not as durable. I think both are proving those things in the opposite, and obviously to the Panthers' enjoyment, and obviously to affect victories.
And of course, we saw Derek miss entirely all of last season, so for him to get back to where he is. But it is so true, and I was just talking about with Julian Council from Locked On Panthers just yesterday about how this defense, who was, quote, historically poor a season ago, is being led by these guys that they have invested in while building pieces around them and just kind of letting them do their thing. Derek Brown with the 2 sacks in this game, this is a new thing for him. This hasn't exactly been part of his game, but he's been asking the coaching staff to give him those opportunities to be going for those plays, which is awesome. Swatting guys away, swatting balls down. And then, of course, JC, I was listening on the radio as I was driving at one point yesterday, and they're like, he looks bored out there, is kind of what you were saying, too. Like, he doesn't affect the game until he makes a miraculous play, oftentimes for maybe the viewer. But when he does, he shows that he is elite. And again, so cool to see this defense. In terms of XL, we were talking about T-Mac, and yes, having someone else stepping up takes a lot of that pressure off of T-Mac when he is getting probably the best DB on him each game. So yes, that's awesome to see for that. Doesn't get that touchdown yesterday, though, without Bryce Young. So we got to talk about the elephant in the room right now, because it was in the end of the third quarter when Bryce Young was trying to twist away from getting a sack. He kind of fell down awkwardly, maybe tripped over the defender's lower leg in the process of it. He goes down with an injury. He gets up on his own power, walks to the locker room, I would say limps to the locker room. And then there was some conflicting reports ever since then about what his availability would be. Well, starting first, Dave said, we're going to go back to Charlotte and figure things out, get testing done. We hear reports this morning that he's out at least this week with the Bills, but potentially 2 to 4. Then we hear Dave say, wait, pump the brakes. We're going to say it's day-to-day at this point. What do you make of, I guess, the conflicting reports that we're hearing right now?
Well, I think I would lean more on the more conservative nature of the reporting and saying, hey, it probably feels like an ambitious thing to see that he plays this week. I don't doubt the player. And I also don't doubt the intentions, the good intentions of the coach, because I think, again, it comes down to the player and trying to protect the player even at times, because obviously Bryce, we've talked about a lot during his time. One of the concerns about him from a lot of people was, how would this guy stay upright? How would this guy stay put together? And to his credit, other than some like little bumps and bruises type things, he's been pretty okay when it comes to his NFL career. This obviously is one you look at and say, could affect him adversely when it comes to standing upright in the pocket. It affects, obviously, planting and stepping off and pushing and getting any kind of strength behind the ball. And that's something he has to be able to prove that he can do this week if he wants to have any chance of playing. I know that they said they were going to try to get him out there on Wednesday. It would not shock me if Bryce was limited or out for practice on Wednesday while still trying to give it a go on Thursday. I know that, if it gets beyond Thursday, it's probably not going to happen where he plays, even if Friday maybe is just a simulated walkthrough. They do a little bit more on Friday when they don't have to travel. So as a result, it's a situation where maybe it's even by Friday we get an opportunity to see whether or not, when Dave speaks to us on Fast Friday, whether or not he ends up playing. But I think the one thing, too, that's interesting about this is the fact they do have Andy Dalton, and that's why you have an experienced backup quarterback like him. You don't have him in to be a starter, but you have him in to step in and maintain competence with the position. And I think when you think about what he brings to the table, I don't think the offense changes all that much. Yes, maybe a lot of the boot stuff that they did with Bryce doesn't happen, but I also think you can still do a lot of the same things with Andy that you do with Bryce. A lot of play action, obviously, when it comes down to the run game, that's obviously going to be a big feature. And I think, too, the thing that it comes back down to is you have to prove you can pass it in order to be able to run it effectively, because we know that Carolina's run game has been their most effective part and most effective weapon this season.
Yeah, I want to go more into what this offense could be looking like, whether it be Dalton or whether it be Bryce Young this coming weekend and potentially moving forward in the near future. But we're going to take a quick break and get back to that in just a few. All right, so there are some question marks around the quarterback position as we enter Week 8 back at home for the Panthers, bringing in the Buffalo Bills. This is a team, obviously, that has experience with Andy Dalton. It was a different situation last year, not an injury-related one. It was more of a benching one when he came in and took over for Bryce. But during that time, he got to know the offense. He got to know some of the players. We heard from Xavier Legette, who just is coming off of arguably the best game of his career this past weekend, and he said he doesn't really feel like anything truly changes between if it's Bryce or if it's Andy under center. Andy likes to sling the ball, though. Like, this could potentially open up opportunities for these receivers, too. What do you think?
We're going to see a lot, Danielle, about how much Dave Canales has matured as a play caller with this team. If, in fact, they can still contain the same run-pass balance and run-pass effectiveness with Andy, if in fact he does start, that they would with Bryce. I think a lot of times maybe Dave has kind of gone to the run as a clutch because of the fact that, or crutch I should say, as opposed to, maybe throwing it a little bit more, say, with Andy. And I think there were times, particularly that Seattle game last year, where he just kind of he was throwing it almost too much.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that was also dictated to game situation. But the fact of the matter is that, like you said, Andy loves to sling it. XL was his favorite target when he was in there. I think he caught 13 balls and a touchdown or two when Andy was the starter. So from that perspective, you obviously look at that and say it could be a boon for XL, but I also think, too, this could be a boon for even a guy like a Hunter Renfrow, because I think Hunter has kind of gotten lost a little bit in this offense. Jalen Coker was targeted twice in his return game on Sunday, didn't have really an impact on the contest, so this could be a thing that enriches the wide receivers, because I think you don't fear this game with Andy in it. I think also, though, the biggest thing that needs to be a part of what this offense looks like, again, is still that run game. And I think if there's a big gripe that Panther fans had after the 13-6 victory over the New York Jets, it was the timeshare distribution between Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. And I think, obviously, coming off the calf injury, Chuba looked a little bit tentative, and Rico still had a lot of those violent runs. I think he had 71 yards rushing on 17 carries, and really had that violent rushing mentality and looked like he was the more effective runner. Dave and Brad Idzik basically said, we're going to alternate these guys in different series. You're going to have a Chuba series and a Rico series. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to go about doing it, because I think so much of what those guys do, while it is on rhythm, they will need breaks within series. And I think, maybe going back to what they kind of did before the Chuba injury, but doing it in reverse, because it does seem like Rico is the hot hand. I think you ride the hot hand for about 65% of it, and then you turn it into a scenario where Chuba becomes the change-up back. I know it might not necessarily be his best attribute, but that gets him more comfortable, that gets him more acclimated, and quite frankly also gives him an opportunity to earn some of that hot hand status back.
Yeah, Dave was asked about that today too. He said if you were to look at them, head-to-head based on what they did in this sharing of the running back carries, like this whole system that they're doing, that Rico did win the day. So does that change how you approach it? Do you put him in first? And he said no. He said we're going to keep going with it. Again, he's putting a lot of this on Chuba, is still acclimating back after this calf injury. He's, again, their money man. They've put a lot of money and investment into him. He's a proven leader on this team, whereas Rico's on a one-year deal for cheap, and they might not be keeping him. But it's true. If they're seeing the results and the yards that are coming from one person, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of pans out. But I think it is still really cool. I've said this the past few weeks on the show, like those two guys seem to really support each other really well, and it's awesome. Like there doesn't seem to be at least externally a competition between the two of them in terms of like, I think I should be getting more than the other because I had 400 plus rushing yards in 2 games. But it's awesome that they're both wanting to help each other out, and they're getting each other's break. And yes, they're both coming off 1,000-yard rushing seasons themselves too. So they both have the potential of doing big things in these series on their own too. But it might just be deciding who's getting the start, and that might be seen differently this weekend. Buffalo does not have a very strong run defense, so this could be a good opportunity for them, if it is Andy Dalton, to really use these two, and also throwing Trevor Etienne in there as well, as like some of the strongest offense that they have in that game. It's too bad this is all happening right when Buffalo's in town, when this team is riding high, 3 straight wins, one of the best teams in the NFL. Maybe that's kind of disappointed a little bit compared to what people thought, but it's still Josh Allen, and it's still his offense. People wanted to see a really good game, and we still might, but I think there's just a little bit of a question mark coming into this now.
I think very much so, and I think also you're going to see a desperate Buffalo team after the way they've played over the course of the last couple of weeks, and results that I think they didn't really expect over the course of their last couple of weeks too. And just another note and thought on the running back scenario, I do like you said, that it hasn't turned combative between those two, and it's probably more fodder for us outside the locker room than it is for them inside the locker room. But I also think, too, that Dave has to kind of recognize when what is working for that particular reason. And I understand that maybe some of the runs that they call for Rico might be different than what they call for Chuba, and they're asked to do different things. But I think from the standpoint of where the Panthers sit, you have to do what's best for the football team. And while you want to play the money man after you've paid the money man, you have to obviously make sure that you are doing right by the rest of the locker room. We see this happen not just with the running back position. We see it happen all the time.
Sure.
And positions that where somebody obviously is shining out over the other, you have to do right by the other 52 guys in that locker room, or in this case it'd be 51. Whereas you look at that and say, hey, am I hurting the football team by trying to ride this out with Chuba as the starter? And so I think it's a situation where it's probably going to be a consistent evaluation. As my people who have been here longer than me can tell me, D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, that was not 100% perfect right away.
Sure.
That was I would say 6 to 8 week evaluation period where they tried to figure out, okay, who goes here when and who goes to what position, and what positions do we use D'Angelo, what positions do we use Jonathan Stewart. And I think it's another consistent evaluation. And I think this is probably the biggest test as well for the Panther defense, absent, of course, what we saw against Dallas. Obviously, Dak and George Pickens had their way at times. But I think too much of what I think Buffalo is going to try to do is maybe similar to what you were talking about with Andy Dalton. They're going to want to try to sling it.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of run attack they're going to have, particularly against the Panther defense in the run game that's been very, very salty. I think you have to try and figure out a way to get to Josh Allen, and I think it comes down to Ejiro Evero doing the things that he did against the Jets, sending pressure with extra men and trying to at least manufacture those looks in his face. He's one of the best at standing upright when it comes to pressure and eluding pressure, and also as well in the run game with him is something you have to account for as well with Josh Allen. So this is a very, very big test for Ejiro Evero, and I think this will totally tell the story about whether or not this Panthers defense has arrived and come full circle from what obviously was a very bad season a year ago.
We talked about some of those guys on defense who are those leaders and those veteran players, JCDB, but what we're seeing out of Princely Mamiellen and Nick Scorton, the two rookie edge rushers, they are having so much fun out there, it looks like, and they have been so impactful every single game. We saw both of them were fantastic against the Jets, both of them with at least a sack. Nick has been itching to finally get his first one, and he got a half at first when he combined with DB on one, but then he got his own solo sack, so that was fantastic for him. I think they will be two people I would really be watching out for on trying to get to Josh Allen in that game. I feel like that is going to be a fun matchup. We have lots more to talk about with this game, but after we see the Bank of America Stadium with the Bills, we're going to be seeing it with a Charlotte FC playoff match. So I want to get on that really quick before we take a break. Just get the ball rolling,
yes,
if you
ma'am.
will. They got home field advantage. They got fourth in the East. That's what they've been wanting all season. But again, at what cost? A Tuesday night is not ideal for them, but it's a matchup that's also maybe not their most favorable one. It's the team that broke that winning streak that they had when they were going for their 10th, which would have broke that MLS all-time record. But New York NYCFC is coming to town. What are your just early impressions on what this series is going to look like?
Well, you also remember that they were the team that helped Charlotte FC start the winning streak too, as well at the beginning. Yeah. So
sandwich.
It's either team that they could have played potentially in that spot. New York or Nashville kind of brought about the same thing. You hadn't played Nashville in forever, so I like that you see a team that you'd seen more recently. Obviously, Zaha's absence is incredibly killer. Although again, I go back to what Dean Smith said, and even Ashley Westwood said. Look, he had been getting mauled during the contest and probably not protected to the level that he wanted to. You can't make that mistake, but I also think it's logically inconsistent to say that you're angry with him about what he did in that moment, but also not acknowledging that you're not in the position you are in without him. 20 goal contributions. You could argue he's the best DP they've signed outside of Karol Swiderski, and I think there are numbers that you could suggest that from a single season aspect, he's had a greater impact than what Swiderski did in any of his best seasons with Charlotte FC. So from the standpoint of where I sit, this is a situation for Charlotte where you have to lean on other guys, Vargas, Toklamati, Liel Abada. obviously lean on the defensive prowess that you've had in many, many opportunities this season, and then lean on the bank, which has been a fortress for them this season with 13 wins and 40 points accrued.
Hopefully they can do that on a Tuesday night as well. We're going to take a quick pause. I have a couple more points I'm going to talk about with Zaha and the rest of FC when we get back. All right, so Charlotte FC is home to the most fouled player in a single season in MLS history, I believe. Is that correct, Willie B?
Correct.
So,
to John Gasparoni for first bringing that one to my attention in the week. I think he had 8 fouls sustained in the game against Philadelphia on Saturday, which put him up at 126 or 127, depending on how many you counted him for by the end of it.
People knew the reputation of Wilf Zaha when they signed him. He's been, throughout his career, known to be a little bit of an instigator. He likes to stir the pot, perhaps you could say, with his play, but he does a great job at drawing fouls at the end of it. So when it's one of those things, it's like when he's on your team, it's great. When it's the other team, it's like kind of that agitator. We saw DC United just the week before. They went down to 9 men because of fouls from caused by Zaha. So like when you see the 90th minute of a decision day match when they just had to finish it out, like, were you not feeling frustrated at all? Of course, that, like, we've seen him get all these fouls and fouls and fouls on him for the whole season, but like, you gotta just go for 3 minutes, right?
Well, when I tweeted out that stat, there were more than a couple of Charlotte FC fans who came back at me and said, and that's just the ones that were called.
Sure.
So I think there was a big frustration, not just with the ones that weren't called, but it does seem like that when it persistently happens during a game, it's not properly punished. And, even people ask me, from a yellow card standpoint, how many of those fouls against him were probably yellow card level offenses, but they get lost in the shuffle because just Zaha accrues so many fouls. So I do think that there is maybe a greater responsibility on those protecting him, who are at least tasked on doing that, the referees and the fourth officials and things of that nature. And again, like I said before, there's no excuse for doing what he did. But I think, again, like I said, it's logically inconsistent to say, hey, he's not a big reason how you got here. And, of course, he does that to oppositions, too. Well, you think about the Aaron Herrera headbutt in the D.C. contest. That won them the game. That's part of getting them to the top 4. And there are other instances, too, where he's drawn fouls and drawn attention from opposition that has gotten him and Charlotte FC in better positions. And I think, too, he was coming right into his own, too, with the touches of class that he had. I mean, he had an incredible goal in the Montreal game. He had the one-touch finish against DC. Obviously, the first goal in the game against Philadelphia, he was really starting to find his stride. So it is a crushing blow. But I think if you ask Dean Smith, he's not worried about it because I think he knows he's got enough offensive quality with Vargas and Abada. I think Toklamati has been a bit snake-bit. He had 2 very, very high-danger chances that were saved by Andre Blake in the game against Philadelphia. And I think, too, from the standpoint of where Charlotte FC sits, they're leaning on that defensive solidarity that has gotten them to this point. Kalina's got, another clean sheet in his belt to kind of think about as well. And you look at New York, and I'll say this flatteringly, they're a team that wins a lot via their system, and I think a lot of it, too, they lean on their home building as well, and that home building just happens to be a pair of baseball stadiums.
Yeah.
So they know how to play in those buildings. When they go out to road venues, they are not as strong. They had a decent run of form during the middle part of the season. Then they came to the bank and got shut out 2-0. So I think it's a situation where they don't have anybody who strikes a significant amount of fear. They've got a nice striker in Alonso Martinez. They got a couple of decent wingers. But I'm not looking at this and saying there's Messi on the other side and I'm shaking in my boots. So it is a situation where you lean on Tim Riemann and Dilson Malanda. You lean on the 2 fullbacks, Nathan Byrne and Harry Toffolo. I don't think we talked enough about how well Toffolo played as well.
He did fantastic in that full game that he finally was able to play.
And he will get forward and he'll push Abada in a lot more, so he'll act almost kind of as a pseudo winger. So I think from the standpoint of where Charlotte FC sits, this is what Dean Smith wants from a blueprint standpoint. He wants fullbacks to press high. He wants the midfielders to really mess things up for the opposition. I think Charlotte's going to come out and try to be the aggressor and dictate the terms and hopefully get themselves a victory to where they have control of the series. series next Tuesday.
Definitely want to just circle back that I completely agree that this team is who they were because of Zaha this year. He has been like one of the most fun players, and he's created so much. Also have to note that they would not be in this position without Pep Biel, and that's another huge loss that they're having. Of course, we know that he's out for the season, but we've seen other players step up. I want to just ask you, because I have someone who I think in mind, like, if there's one particular player you would like to see step up or maybe is stepping up at the right time, who you think could be a good person, I feel like Vargas has been hitting his stride so well in the last couple of weeks, whether it be scoring himself or just like being that winger and helping to create some great chances with some crosses. Like, I think he has been someone that's been really exciting to watch. Do you have anyone else, or him in particular, that you think is like gonna set them apart at this point?
Well, I'll talk about two players, because I'll talk about the player who's in there outside of Pep Biel, or in place of Pep Biel, and Jabril Gianni.
Yeah.
And he's obviously not the creative player that Pep Biel is. They push Bronico up to play that 10 role. But I think what Jabril brings is that those three have played so very many minutes together, and they play incredibly well defensively together. And what you might lose offensively with Pep Biel, you gain defensively with what Didi brings to the table. Dean Smith said something very particular before the last game, where he said he is still kind of feeling taking that penalty in the Orlando match, the decisive match a year ago. And so after he's kind of gotten over that, he's looked a lot like the player we saw that got many minutes last year. And Vargas is another guy who, you want to talk about somebody who's really transformed this game under Dean. He was not a defensive defense was not his strength when he came here and played under our first manager and our first two managers in the opening year. And he's completely turned that part of his game around. It's gotten him more minutes. He's kept the shot down, and he had a very, very big impact in the game on Saturday. Was part of the MLS best 11 for the week. He had a goal and an assist, and I think it'll be very much on him to keep that shot down, be defensively sound against a very, very tough left side that New York brings to the table, but obviously also one that could very well pose some problems, and hopefully he can cause some of his own as well.
And hopefully we see more flips at the bank. I think that's what everyone really is looking for when they come to see matches these days.
Big fan of the Vargas fault.
Who wouldn't love that? So we've got lots coming to Charlotte in the next couple of weeks, honestly, but really cool for FC to be able to lock up that home field advantage. Be here for the start of the series. Panthers back in town too. That is Panthers on the Plus. Thank you so much for watching.